front is opening up in the Pacific. U.S. Coast Guard moving ships closer to China as Washington works to push back against the country's growing maritime influence. 6 fast response cutters that previously operated in the Middle East are now being deployed in Asia, including Singapore and the Philippines. NTD's Tiffany Meyer has more.
The U.S. cutters are part of a new Coast Guard squadron designed for global deployments. This marks the first time the smaller vessels are operating from Subic Bay, a strategic location near the South China Sea. The ships are expected to remain in the region through at least September, supporting U.S. Pacific operations. Beijing has expanded its Coast Guard presence in disputed waters, where its vessels have harassed ships from neighboring countries. Chinese vessels have confronted Philippine ships using water cannons and other aggressive tactics. U.S. officials say the cutters can conduct patrols, law enforcement missions, and maritime security operations with regional allies. The deployment comes as the U.S. Navy has shifted some resources to support operations in the Middle East, but the Coast Guard faces its own challenges, including aging ships and the need for more resources. A roughly $25 billion investment approved by Congress will help fund new Coast Guard ships and aircraft. The move comes as Washington competes with Beijing for influence across the Pacific.
And China is building a full-scale replica of a U.S. warship in the middle of a vast, remote desert. Taiwanese analyst who first spotted what he calls Beijing's first-ever 3D mock-up of a U.S. destroyer says it could be linked to China's attempts to refine hypersonic missile targeting. He also says it could also be a signal that China wants to remain combat-ready amid the simmering tension over Taiwan. Here are the details.
At first, it looks like any American warship at sea. Then you notice the sand. More than 1,000 miles from the nearest coastline, hundreds of miles from any major city, deep inside the western Chinese desert, what appears to be a full-scale mock-up of a U.S. Navy Arleigh Burke-class destroyer. Look at it side by side with the USS Fitzgerald. The resemblance is striking. Both are around 510 feet long. At the back, the helicopter flight deck used to launch and recover naval helicopters. Next are the vertical launch systems, cells used to fire guided munitions like the Tomahawk cruise missile, heavily used in the conflict with Iran. This is the bridge and command area, where navigation, communications, and combat operations are controlled. At the front is the deck gun, used for surface targets, air threats, and shore bombardment. Together, the details suggest a carefully built, full-scale replica of one of America's main guided missile destroyers, workhorses of the U.S. Navy fleet, more than 70 sailing in oceans around the world. If conflict ever erupts over Taiwan, these destroyers would likely be among the first U.S. warships deployed. Han Su analyzes China's military for Taiwan's top defense research institute. Why would China go through all the effort and expense to build this?
The Chinese try to prepare everything from A to Z.
The Chinese military has ballistic missiles that can attack from high angles and cruise missiles that can attack horizontally. So they're trying to combine both and enhance their anti-access and area denial capability.
He says they're trying to improve the accuracy of China's newest hypersonic anti-ship missiles displayed at Beijing's military parade last year. The 3D replica is covered with antennas designed to simulate the radar signature of an American warship, helping China detect, identify, and perhaps target the real thing. It's located in Xinjiang, the same area where the People's Liberation Army built 2D flat mock-ups of U.S. aircraft carriers and destroyers several years ago, even putting them on tracks, analysts say, to move at the speed of actual ships. Have they ever built a 3D mock-up before?
It's first time.
Open source intelligence analyst Joseph Wen first spotted the mock-up when it was still under construction about a month ago.
I do think this is quite surprising. The scale of the construction is really massive.
What message are they trying to send by building this?
The message that they are sending is China is always preparing for war.
Under leader Xi Jinping, China has poured billions into modernizing its military, from aircraft carriers and nuclear weapons to artificial intelligence. The PLA has also long trained using mock-ups of everything, from U.S. military assets to Taiwan's presidential office. On China's tightly controlled social media, censors are allowing comments like these. The U.S. military's premier escort warships, long regarded as a source of pride, have now become designated targets for Chinese missiles. They are nothing more than targets sitting in the desert, waiting to be hit.
Chinese party to provide a lifeline to the Iranian government for years, providing tens of billions of dollars, especially in the Trump administration looked to put an end to that. Again, they didn't take every single sanction that was available to them, but I think right now it's not only a military hammer on the IRGC and the supreme leader and his minions, but also an economic and financial hammer to whatever is left of what we call an Iranian government.
China's influence campaign on U.S. campuses. A U.S. senator is sounding the alarm, saying China is exploiting American universities to gain access to sensitive technology. Here's what Senator Jim Banks had to say.
I was alarmed when I got to the House and better understanding how the CCP, the United Front, operates on college campuses. And back then we were talking about Huawei grants to major public universities, and the more that they were reported for really the first time on Trump's watch, the more astonished I was at how much money was being poured by the CCP into our colleges. And then we took a look at what previously was seen as innocuous outfits like Confucius Institutes. And you better understood why the CCP sets up, why the United Front sets up Confucius Institutes on our college campuses.
Banks says Congress has pushed for more transparency around foreign funding, research partnerships, and programs linked to China. He points to efforts to shut down Confucius Institutes and sever university ties with Chinese entities as examples of progress. But the senator warns Beijing continues to find new ways to build relationships and access American tech research. Banks says protecting university innovation is critical to keeping advanced technology out of the hands of China's military.
Earlier this month, China test-fired a nuclear-capable ballistic missile from a submarine. It traveled nearly 4,000 miles before landing southeast of Nauru, a Pacific island nation. The launch demonstrated China's capability to strike Australia. To discuss it further, we spoke with retired Marine Colonel Grant Newsham. He's the author of When China Attacks and a senior fellow at the Center for Security Policy. How are you reading this underwater missile test and what message China is trying to send to the region?
Well, this was apparently the first one they've done like this since about 1982, so it's been a long time. This is really like a dog marking its territory, and that is what the Chinese are saying is, we're coming, and you better listen to us, or what are you going to do about it? And there's nothing sort of normal about this. It isn't just testing the systems, but rather there are clear messages that they're sending, not least to the Pacific Island nations. And the Chinese are angry that particularly the top leaders of the Pacific Island Forum met recently in Fiji and did not knuckle under to China's demands that Taiwan not be allowed to participate in the full meeting, which comes up in a month or two. And as you've noted, they're also angry about the deals that Australia has cut with, most recently with Fiji, but shortly before that with Vanuatu and now in the Solomon Islands. You've got a new administration in power that is not quite so, is not slavishly pro-China like the previous ones have been. So China's very angry, and they are really telling people that you better back off and listen to us. So keep in mind that analogy of a dog marking his territory. They're telling us exactly what they intend to do.
With the Vanuatu, Fiji, and now Solomon Islands kind of changing its alliances, if you will, how do you see that maybe weakening China's influence across the Pacific, or is it?
Well, at face value, these agreements do sort of diminish China's influence to a degree. But you have to ask yourself, of course, how many ships are there in the Australian Navy to actually protect these countries that they're promising to protect? When you've only got 11 warships in your Navy, which realistically that means maybe 5 or 6 that you can deploy. Well, the Chinese have a whole lot more ships, so it's not clear that Australia can actually protect these countries. Also, when the Australians make these deals, they do them at the very top levels. There's no referendums in the nations to approve them, and referendums are better because you have more popular support. In fact, the sort of leader-to-leader kind of deal is something that the Chinese do. So the next time they cut a deal, they're going to say, well, you did the same thing. Also, the deals the Australians have signed, they have largely a security component to them. And it's actually the economic and the commercial influence which is as important. And that's where the Chinese have a presence in each of these places that they use, to great effect. And the Australians aren't backing this up with, as I say, with a commercial economic component to it. So it isn't quite the great victory for Australia and the West and the great loss for the Chinese, as one might imagine. It's a little more sort of ambivalent than that.
说白了，和全民互相。
这个白人极左，对不对？好，再来呢，毒品、黑帮，好，再来呢，极端伊斯兰，这3个都是当代3大恐怖主义威胁。所以唐诺主义到最后变成对抗这3大威胁。所以这3大威胁里面，当然包括对抗中共，这是你可以纯粹用地缘政治来理解，说大国博弈。
而且背后很多都是他们很多人被中共成为他们的代理人，中共在后面用。
当然要代理人嘛，当然会有代理人，也会有宣传路线等等。我是说。川普2.0的主轴在唐诺主义，唐诺主义分成陆权、海权，然后呢，具体操作上不单纯针对与中共的对抗，我们称为地缘政治的主轴哈，大戏在这里，美中对抗啊，然后不单纯在这里了，即便是西方阵营内部啊，比如说欧洲啊，或者东南亚或者中东地区，即便是西方阵营内部也有白人极左。啊，然后呢，这个黑帮搞的毒品运动啊，毒品恐怖主义，再来呢，当然就伊斯兰，所以这里就是伊朗的问题嘛，啊，就这样来，所以你会发现，川普所处理的事情全部可以串起来，啊，就是针对美国所感受到的最新威胁，来自于共产主义，来自于恐怖主义，所以我们把它通称总合起来叫做反恐。它这个反恐不是单纯针对恐怖主义的恐怖组织的那些恐怖攻击这样的反恐而已，包括你毒品用黑帮用毒品进来，那也是毒品恐怖主义啊。像你那个伊朗控制荷姆兹海峡来威胁国际经济秩序，这个也是一种恐怖主义啊。所以呢，他把美国感受到的威胁上升到从国家安全啊界定为美国感受到的威胁。所以川普政府的内阁成员都有共识、有责任感，要来对抗这些对美国的威胁。所以呢，他们开始要对中共推出一个又一个的制裁，啊，从科技设备的出口管制到很多重要的东西不能卖给你。以前是要你撤出中国，要脱钩，现在是要怎么样？有一部分制造业希望回流美国，这是第一点。第二点呢，要打造恢宏供应链，就是中国企业的东西。不买了，我不但不在中国生产制造，我中国的企业的产品零件我也不买了，要恢宏供应链啊。所以台湾的无人机制造强迫规定不能买中国企业生产的任何零件啊，要打造一个完全的那个恢宏供应链，表示美国在认真看待共产主义加恐怖主义啊，甚至于加毒品的威胁。
那你看最近不管是毒品啊，在美国这边宣布的，欧洲的、东南亚的、美国的毒品的供应链背后都是中国，诈骗这些集团也都跟中共一些相关，甚至跟中共勾结，洗钱网络，全世界最大的洗钱网络也是中共在后面搞的。
等一下，就算不是中共干的，美国要对付，不是？中共是当然是大咖，对不对？哈，是一个重要的那个对象。我说的是川普政府，川普2.0。全方位来看，你一下子看他搞这个搞那，好像搞得好像疯子一样、疯狗一样，其实不是，你把它全部串起来，4个字叫唐诺主义啊，就是川普版本的门罗主义，然后2块海权陆权啊，然后呢你会发现他认知到的威胁啊，来自于共产主义加恐怖主义的结合，那这个对美国的威胁是真的。
很感谢，我们休息一下，马上回。